Hi, great to be with you all this week, our week one on co-designing the future. I'm really excited. If you haven't noticed already, I've made contact with as many of you as possible. Hello to those people I don't know personally, and welcome back to those who have sustained session one and participated in so many activities. Speaking of which, I don't want this just to be a semester, an intensive session just dedicated to co-designing the future. I'm going to try and embed all of you in as many public activities as I'm part of, as my collaborators, as my peers. I expect to learn from you this session, and I expect to share with you as much as possible. If you need a query, anything at all, you can use the community board on our Canvas website. You can reach out to me when it's an emergency and you can't make my office hours, katina.michael@asu.edu. You can try me perhaps on LinkedIn, although I haven't been present for a couple of months, just recovering after a national and international conference last year, late in the year. But in this session, I look forward to imbuing in you what co-design means and how we apply co-design to public interest technology projects. And so you know what public interest technology is because you've worked with Eric Fisher in your first course ever at ASU in the Masters of Science. And then you've assessed technologies with Bob Cook-Deegan. And now it's time to use those fundamental principles that you learned, both about public interest tech and about technology assessment from a guru of gurus. And we're going to walk through what I'm calling very much a design thinking exercise, but different here because of the methodology being applied and also the project area. So usually what we do is we do things in the public interest, but still they're usually for profit, and they're a bit different from the requirement to have many stakeholders around the table to actually solve a problem. And usually those stakeholders in public interest tech usually have very different missions, very different imperatives, conflicts of interest that they don't, and some do declare. They come from various sectors, private sector, like industry. They come from government agencies. They come from non-government organizations and not-for-profits, among community groups, from citizenry, and so many more. And we usually typify these in socio-technical theory as being operational stakeholders and non-operational stakeholders, where users also sit in between this sort of dotted line chasm. So if we advance the slides here, the course learning objectives you would have known about when you joined. They're also published on the my.asu.edu Canvas handbook, and they are as follows. At the completion of this course, students will be able to demonstrate the ability to work in a team, and I can't underscore how important that is. I'll give you every opportunity, and it's going to be up to you how much you embrace that. Although I think the course workload will be much easier if shared among team members than trying to do everything yourself. The next objective is for you to be able to develop or engage in a public interest technology project using a co-design method. And so that's two-pronged. I want you to be involved in a real project that you're passionate about, that will keep you awake at night. I know many of you work. It's very tiring doing coursework. I know I'm also a remote student with Cambridge University. But using the co-design methodology, not just design thinking. And so we'll talk about the very different extremes there. I want you to be able to design across one or more vertical applications or areas, including something like transport, utilities, healthcare, housing, safety. For example, if you choose housing, maybe you look at the homelessness question. If you look at healthcare, maybe you look at mental health and the fact that we're spiraling out of control with mental health issues in many places of the world, particularly those in the 18 to 24-year-old, which typifies some of you in this course. And finally, the ability to elicit and analyze end users' needs to innovate responsibly. And so I want you to have direct contact with end users. And this is a shift in mindset from the traditional systems development lifecycle through to building with users and empowering users to lead. And so this kind of thing is not for every project. I mean, if some of you are in corporate, and thinking, great, co-design sounds wonderful. From what I'm reading so far in the weekly readings, this looks cool, but it may not actually suit your particular project. So I underscore that at the beginning of this course. I would love you to use co-design in absolutely everything you do. You may not have the budget for it on occasion. The actual problem identification may not suit co-design, and stakeholders may not be willing to engage. The other question with public interest technology projects is who's the funder? It's not like a traditional funding where you do an internal assessment. You've got your financial and commercial team working with accounts and business developers saying, I think we should go forward or not. So they're the learning objectives. I try to keep it simple. We've got 7 weeks of lectures, and you'll get those in various formats. Sometimes it'll be a PowerPoint, as it is today, and sort of threading through all the readings so that they're like a summary. But I wouldn't rely on the PowerPoints just for that. But this week we're starting out with build the conditions. And what I did, friends, when I went through, I compared about 14 or 15 different phases and stages and gates of various uh, PDFs and papers and literature reviews that claimed they did co-design or community design or participative design. And I compared the various levels. Now, sometimes it's as little as 2 stages, sometimes 4, very common, others 6. And if we look at this particular one I've used, this paradigm, between 6 and 8. But we have 7 weeks, and I want to have like a pitch day or a demonstration day, an idea that came from Eric Johnson, the individual professor who will teach into the next session of co-designing the future. So I have the A at this time of the year, and Eric has the B at the next 6 months. And you can see here, if we go through the stages, the first stage is to build the conditions. And I'm talking about building the conditions for the project, figuring out which project, with whom am I working? Am I working in a large team of 10? Is it going to be small groups of 3? Getting your head around the deep level of assessment. And I'll be the first to say that I'm over assessing. But the assessment is there to help you understand the various kinds of milestones and process that you might decide to build for your startup, to build for your organization that you're working for full-time, beyond your studies, all as a proof of concept towards some other proposal that you're considering in the community. Whatever it is, I'm giving you every single tool that you will say to me in 10 years' time, Kat, I'm very happy that I took your course because I'm still using the same templates and I've, been innovative on a few, but the fundamentals is something that I was exposed to in your class. And that's typically what I do. I really enjoy sharing that kind of thing with students who are ingenious in my eyes and whom I also consider my senior in many ways. So after building the conditions, you immerse and align. So in this instance, you're going to immerse yourselves in interview questions and an interview protocol, and you'll try and find an end user to interview. And if you choose to do this project in a group of 10, you may all do 1 interview each, which means you're going to have a rich output of 10 interviews. At the same time, I want you to be able to transcribe the interviews, look at semi-structured or unstructured interviews, have research aims and goals. Why are you asking each question in the interview list? And then go through and gain consent from the individual end user you'll be interviewing. Jot down the time, the day, and give the individual a chance to actually review the transcript. So you've got to work fairly quickly in week 2. We then discover, we look at those interviews and we say, what are the patterns emerging? What are the pains identified? What are those challenges that different stakeholders are meeting? Are they recurring? Do they feed into each other some way? Do they map into one another? This pain causes this issue, and here's the proposition for the solution for that particular pain and the reason for that pain. You'll also at that point do what I call concept mapping and really start to identify what are those problem prioritization points. And we have a couple of templates that we're using in the software platform called Mural, M-U-R-A-L. I've sent you all our invites to that, and if you haven't got one or you're still a bit confused, let me know in my office hours on Monday today, and I'd be happy to help you get around that. But the wonderful thing with Mural and other software that's coming out, which is like a blank canvas, like think about it like a paintbrush where you can paint things on top, is that if you have like these preset pro formas or templates or frameworks, it means that you can dive straight away. It's like trigger points, like what should I be doing when I'm doing problem prioritization or, you know, visual storyboarding or scenario mapping. Um, and it helps a great deal. One day you may be one of the developers of a template that a lot of people begin to use, and wouldn't that be great? Like we have some examples in Mural from Facebook, from Atlassian, from various companies, Accenture. And so you're talking about very innovative work that is occurring that you can then use almost like open source to do your building for your project. And so after the building the conditions, the immerse and align, the discovery, we then start to look at design. So once I've discovered what those pain points are, the reasons for the pains, how to overcome them, I then start to be thinking about what are the solutions and how do they fit into one another? Is it technological? Is it coordination, wise? What is it? Is it infrastructural? And I'm not going to tell you that the design has to include a technology, because when we talk public interest tech, we're not just talking about shiny, glitzy phones. We're possibly talking about deeper business processes. And so we start thinking about technology in a different way. It could be coordination, for example. Post the design, we start to prototype. And what I've done is I've flipped around some of the assessments I had described on YouTube. And what I'm doing here very early on is prototyping in an agile way and suggesting that you do that just after the design phase in order to know what's going on. And then test and refine, and then our pitch day. And they're sort of our building blocks and modules for this session. So by the end of this lecture, okay, this particular given lecture on build the conditions, you're going to be able to provide a definition of co-design. So I want you in your own words to have the confidence after you doing the readings and defining what co-design is. Describe what a co-design process looks like in terms of the phases, and you might use the phases that I've presented or some of the 14 others. Discuss the suitability of co-design methods for the public interest technology projects that you've chosen. And remember what we said, some might be suitable and some may not be. Identify an individual or group project to work on during the semester. And this is really important to me. Use the community board, friends. You've got 7 days to declare what your project is. And this is a special 7 days because I've got readings for you almost every other day. I've got a 2-mark activity due at the end of the week where I want you to look at the lived experience versus the professional experience and encourage you to do both. Be the whole person in your workplace and see how that drives different kinds of insights, because it will. And then I also want you to prepare ahead. So quite possibly after you have, declared your project, and some of you have been doing that thinking for about a week now since I left an announcement in your inboxes via email. Quite possibly you might approach me and say, well, we're thinking of interviewing this end user. What do you think, Kat? And you may also say to me, look, we've got a rough set of questions that we want to ask, and this is how they link back to the research aims that we have for the project. And so are you going to do a project on homelessness? Are you going to do a project on Jedi, justice, and accessibility, and inclusiveness, and equity, and diversity? What are you going to do the work on? Are you going to look at mental health? Are you going to look at gender violence? Are you going to look at incarceration? Are you going to look at working with youth for age-appropriate services in the digital realm? Are you going to look at disability issues? Whatever it is, it's got to be in the public interest and something all of you can segue into and feel passionate about. It's very important to me that you just don't do this project for the sake of doing it. I want you to desperately choose something you've always wanted to do but never dared. And that's when we're going to get magic happening. When you start to being very honest with yourself about why you ended up in this course and why I hope I attracted you to join it. It would be very sad for me for you to get to the end of the course and go, you know what, that was a missed opportunity. I didn't do that with Dr. Michael, and I didn't do that in my Masters of Science. But deeply, I'm saying to you that this co-designing the future project is the precursor to your applied project at the end of your studies. So that very last course you engage us with at ASU in your Masters of Science, I really want that to be an extension of this project that you're doing in this class. And there's lots of things I'm working on where I would love your help. I'm the working group chair um, of age appropriate digital services. Thinking about the things that are going on with terms and conditions on young people. Recently we had Instagram really bamboozle young people by saying, they had all these rights to access things on their handsets and their apps. And I remember my eldest child reading out to me just before Christmas. Of course, it was launched on the 24th of December here in Australia, all these changes, and he was just in shock. So if my 17-year-old is in shock over Instagram demands, then, it's got something to say. And our young people are quite outspoken, outraged on occasion, and other times complacent. So there has to have to be a healthy balance there of what's going on. But that's just one of many projects, of course. And then where you're going to situate this project is another question. So here's the lived experience and the professional expertise. You can see that in a Venn diagram here, and the union of these is somewhere there where you've got the lived experience and the professional expertise. Often we're expected to be professional at the expense of our lived experience. So very few people would declare, for example, that they're a refugee. Very few people may declare that they were once imprisoned. Very few people may declare their gender orientation. Very few people may declare their religious beliefs. And very few people may or may not declare their political orientation, whatever that might be. But I'm actually advocating that one of the reasons the world is in such a mess at the moment, and it is, pandemic or no pandemic, our US has been thrown into disarray at the moment. And I know the majority of you come from the US, so I feel happy to use that as an example. And happy is not the right word, I think it's just relevant. But one of the reasons why we are in the mess that we are in, I think, in the States, is because these things haven't been considered together by individuals. So they're either on one side of the Venn diagram or the other, but they're not at the union intersecting area here, which is both the lived experience and the professional expertise. So often corporations want this without the lived experience, like keep that experience at home, like we're separate people, bit schizophrenic there, I think. And so I advocate for authenticity in all that I do. I think people who know me will personally know that I try to practice my life in the most authentic way I know. This course is not just about discovering co-design as a process, but possibly discovering or rediscovering yourself. And I'm looking to engage the whole person, not just half of you. I don't want to really engage just the professional you. I'd love to see those outputs and going, fantastic work with the professional stuff, but where's the lived experience? At the same time, I don't expect you to spill your guts to me and talk to me completely about your lived experience, although I'm always willing to hear if that intersects and is relevant to the professional experience. Because many of you have already been students at some graduate level. You have your lived experience in some way. Some of you are married, some of you have children, some of you have been othered, some of you have, um, you know, been challenged by different circumstances. And thank you to those who have shared. But I understand, being now almost 45, I totally understand the lived experience and how much that influences your professional life. I used to be of the opinion maybe 25 years ago that these should be separate as well. It took some brave people near me to basically say, hey, it's okay, you can be the whole person. And most recently, I think through ASU's School for the Future of Innovation in Society, I've become more the whole person in the way I engage, although that's been a gradual progression now over the last 5 years or so. So I know many of you hold significant corporate positions, some of you academic in other universities, some of you in defense, and the list goes on. I will not compromise your roles. I will not share to the public what you are engaged in. That is utterly confidential. At the same time, I hope to use this course as a platform for you to stake your voice. If you're not camera shy and you can disclose your name, I really, really, really would love you to participate in my public interest technology colloquium fortnightly. That's on a Wednesday from 12:30 to 2:30 or from 1:30 to 3:30, depending on the week. I would like you to come to my national security workshop on the 18th of February, Australia time zone, and 17th of February, uh, MST time, US. You can come for a couple of hours. You can present on security if you're a security specialist, and otherwise just listen and participate. I'm going to have lots of these opportunities. There's a hackathon where our assistant provost, Peter Schlosser, wants us to consider offering up new United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and a whole lot of other things that I'm part of. So if you're keen, you're welcome. And for those who just cannot squeeze it in because they're doing a heavy course workload at full-time speed, it's okay. You're not going to miss out. And I'll try and record absolutely everything that I do for you to be able to follow on. But you won't get negative marks or you won't be considered as not participating. All I want you to do is to get through the coursework. Anything else is a bonus. But with great respect and honor, you're welcome as my peers to come to these lectures, tutorials, breakout rooms, conferences, national workshops.